Hi, everybody. This is Jamie Yuenger. This is Full Moon Women, but this is a bonus episode. So it's just me. There's not going to be a guest. Normally we put out episodes, or we do put out episodes every other week. So 2 in a month, typically. And those 2 episodes speak to one another. They're kind of a couplet. But this is sort of a bonus episode. So it's set aside. It's separate. Basically, I just wanted to share with you how this podcast and how this community and how this movement started. So that's what I'm going to share is kind of how all this started. So some of you who might know me or are friends with me, you might have an inkling of this. And those of you listening who don't know me, I wanted to just retrace the steps of how we got to this show about the inner lives of women. So, some time ago, my husband, Pete Herkmans, and I, we decided we wanted to start a podcast about the topic of transformation. So people who had gone through a pretty radical transformation in their lives from whatever to another thing. And we called that podcast Totem. And we were working really hard on that podcast. My background is in radio documentary. I went to the SALT Institute for Documentary Studies in Portland, Maine. And so, I knew some people from my history in radio, in the world of podcast making, et cetera. So we reached out to some people while we were making Totem for advice about, how to go about it and how to build a great show. And so we did a whole bunch of different interviews with different guests, different people who had gone through transformations. And then at some point we got some really great advice from some really smart people in public radio, in podcasting, that if we had a really great personal story to tell that dealt with transformation, that was related to the topic of the show, they recommended that we would tell that story. We would tell our story, which, wow, okay. I mean, and we did. We did have an amazing story of transformation. And of course, that in many ways was what sparked the idea for the show in the first place. So that story mainly, the story that we decided to tell to start that podcast was mainly my story. I have a pretty big story of not only moving from the United States to the Netherlands, but also a huge transformation from my childhood and the secrets that I grew up with to breaking out of those secrets and step by step, basically telling the many truths of my life. And so that was a huge story for Pete and I to work on together, to write that script together. And we worked with a really amazing editor, Caroline Hadilaksano, who helped us bring that story into the world. So we launched Totem and we put my story out there as the first episode. It was a really, vulnerable, exciting, enthralling, terrifying experience to share my personal story. A story, if you haven't listened to it, I won't spoil, this, I want to give a spoiler here. I would just say, go listen to the one and only episode of Totem. The title of the episode is called Pandora's Box. Go and listen to that. But let's say, just to say, after we published the story, I got unbelievable feedback from old friends, high school friends, new people in my life. It really was a big deal for me. And I got just a lot of supportive, loving, caring messages from people. So after that came out, it was a big deal. And I kind of came to the realization that I needed to pause on producing Totem because I didn't know why, actually, because I wasn't sure. I just didn't know if we should keep moving forward with the show. And I was hearing a no inside of myself. So we went radio silent. Like we had put all this promotion, like, oh, we're starting this podcast and like, and got people excited and subscribing to the show. And then we went radio silent. And I just trusted myself that there was a reason that I felt like we shouldn't continue moving on. And maybe, I guess it was 6 months later, I just had this kind of whisper come to me like, yeah, it's time to, continue with that journey of making the podcast, but it's a different show. It's a different show. What had happened in the meantime was I had started hosting these retreats for like a day-long retreat for rest and relaxation and reflection for women in person here in the Netherlands. And when we were doing those retreats, women would also share their stories and we would, listen and be together. And I was just thinking, yeah, I think I want to actually make a show about women's stories, women's inner lives. That really was just totally inspiring to me. And I felt like there weren't enough platforms for real women's stories. I'm not talking about celebrity stories. I'm not talking about someone who did anything, particularly great. I'm just talking about real women's incredible stories. And so I brought the idea to Pete and he really loved it. And somehow the name Full Moon Women, which I will share later, the meaning of that, came to me. And so we birthed the idea again of starting the show and basically kind of starting where we left off with Totem. So that's how this all started. And it's been really thrilling to think that my own experience of feeling liberated and courageous of telling my own story and that act helped me connect to real people in my life and also a lot of strangers around topics that before I had felt ashamed about and had felt lonely and disconnected, that in telling my story, I no longer felt that. I felt kind of the opposite of that. I felt empowered and I felt connected to people. I just really wanted to make a show that would offer that opportunity up to other women. So that's how this all started. I will close for now, but I'll let you know that on Friday, February 4th, 2022, we have Mina's story coming out. So 1 week from the publishing of this bonus episode, Mina Perry's story comes out. And the only other thing I wanted to say is that we have a newsletter for Full Moon Women. It comes out the same day as the episodes come out. And it just has a whole bunch of fun, great stuff in it that you probably will really find resource giving and life giving and inspiring, including art and poetry, and links to the episodes, but also links to extra content. So if you want to get the newsletter, look in the show notes and sign up. All right. Bye for now.